Welcome back to My Hero Academia Anime Review, episode number 15. This one reviewing the 55th episode? Yeah, the 55th episode, class 1A, and the two newest chapters released in the manga. Chapter 192.5, Everybody's Surely Someone's Hero, and 1A Traces. Let's talk about this particular chapter. Now, I was just looking up in my manga book because the adapted chapter from this book here is that online it says this adapts from chapter 106 partially. That kind of is true because in the last episode, looking up in this book here, looking at the pages that they probably adapt from, for this one, for the start of the episode, it's the first like when you see Shudo, it just finishing up a fight that happened on panel. Mostly, this particular thing is focused on about 4 different areas when it comes to these characters. And Genium is nowhere in this episode. First is Shudo, where you see him wrapping up his battle, basically his brawl with the 3 ninjas that he basically started fighting in the last episode. And this episode finishes it up, him going to the ante-room and just hanging out. Which, looking up in this book here, it's the opening 2 pages of the chapter. I'm not kidding about that. It's the opening 2 pages. Because look at this. Like, here is him defeating the ninjas. And then, I would say that this panel here was used in the last episode here. But I would say just, these 2 pages, these, 2.5 pages here were adapted. And then, I would say most last episode adapted about a few pages from this particular chapter, but mostly almost everything else for this particular episode was pretty much the rest of chapter 106. I don't really know why. It's one of the most bizarre things I've seen where they only adapt last episode for this chapter. They only adapted looks like about 3 pages plus a panel. And I'm like, that's it? 3 pages called panels. Yeah. I think things should have said partially for last episode for 106. This episode looks like it adapted pretty much the rest of chapter 106. They adapted that. There's a little bit with Deku, Archina, and the guy who shoots tape out his elbow. There's a little bit of that in this chapter. But, yeah, and there's 2 other, really kind of, big things that happen in this chapter. The one thing that takes up, good half the episode, aside from Shudo's fight, which only took up the first 5 minutes of the episode, is basically Sue, Crave T. Actually, it's Froppy, Crave T, Earphone Jack, and Toto, I think his name is, the guy who basically looks like he's got 6 arms. Yeah, that's where pretty much the second half of the episode is focused on very heavily. There's a little bit of Deku in this episode, but he's only in the episode for about a good 5 minutes. He doesn't have much screen time this episode, which that's surprising. Even look at this chapter again. Yeah, he doesn't have much screen time at all in this chapter because, well, he has a little more in the manga. But the thing is, they use a lot of his screen time that he had, panel time he had in this last episode, in this chapter, in the last episode. This one just a few minutes. Yeah, and the other half is just them, these 4 characters fighting up against this super genius, a woman who has got a super genius, who is a super genius with IQ of 150, and she apparently planned out their strategy to eliminate these 4 people. But the whole thing was to take out Crazy. That was the whole point of it. First, damaging Earphone Jack's one of her earlobes, basically, which is basically a little plug-in thing. Yeah, it's one of these attached to growing from her earlobe. Yeah, that's how her quirk works. And they kind of partially damage that. They block out the window to block the other guy's eyesight, and they turn the temperature down for the room, and they do that so Frappe can go to her hibernation because, well, she's a frog, so hibernation. So they keep her warm with a blanket, and mostly she spends a good chunk of this episode in this guy's arms, just trying to keep warm. And eventually they find a way to get out of the room by using, Earphone Jack's ability and Creative's ability to create this gigantic app that blasts down this door, not only knock everybody unconscious, except for the leader of the group, the super genius. Excuse me. So after everybody leaves the room, Creative, it looks like she leaves the room, but she's pulled right back in, held down, looks like she's about to be taken up with this ball. and then she just forms from handcuffs from her body, and then and then Froppy basically wraps her tongue around the woman's other wrist, and she gets taken out. And they, because before this fight, I think even for Shudo's fight, it was 55, with Shudo basically winning, it was 56, and with these four basically passing, that brings them to about 60 people passing. Yep. So, and according to the announcer, there's about 40 people left. And I know that Deku is definitely going to pass because he's basically guys are licensed in the internship arc. Him and Urikawa. I'm not sure about the guy who forms tape out of his wrist. I think Bakudo's got his too, but that's for later. This is by far a really interesting episode. I mean, mostly you can kind of say that I would say the only thing from this episode that's not from the manga is Creative's group. Their fight was actually not in the manga. That was something out of the show. And there's also Bakudo's group when they fight that guy who can shoot gross stuff out of his hand, out of his body. Yeah, that is from the manga. That's actually from the very end of the chapter, which fits nicely with this episode. Yep. So, just Creative's fight is the only one that's actually filler, but it's great the fact they included this, and the fact that Shudo's fight is actually shown with the ninjas, which I thought was really ingenious, and the fact he used the environment around him to sort of defeat his opponents, which is really smart of him to do. Yep. Yeah, it seems like everybody's plan was to crush 1A, and they sort of split them up, but they haven't shown many of them now. Deku from the last episode has got like one of his 3 targets lit up because he's been hit, but he's not failed yet. You have to have all 3 of those lit up to order to fail. If in fact if this guy takes out people, all of them light up white. Red means they failed. White means they passed. But if it's only one, they're still there, but they lose a point. It's pointing against them. So I gotta say, fantastic episode. All right, next up, I'm gonna talk about the manga. Now, first, I'm gonna start with the .5. Yep, I was a little surprised. This is by far not the only one I've seen recently where they had a .5 for the manga. Yeah, they did the same thing for One Piece recently, and they did it for Seven Deadly Sins for some reason. Yeah, I don't know why, but they did. It was really weird. Like, I keep thinking maybe they do that for Boruto. Okay, for this particular chapter, it's focused on, if it looks like Orduro, I think it is. Yeah, it's Gravity Girl. I think, or either that or probably one of the other girls. Kind of explains like the story itself. Okay, her name is Melissa. I think this was a little girl that popped up recently, most recent chapter. I think, yeah. The way this, like, saying that she's quirkless, and apparently at one point she meets All Might, because All Might pops up in this chapter and she does meet him. Mostly it's just, well, people point out though, yeah, she doesn't have a quirk. She tries to help out best they can, and she apparently her father is no friend of All Might's. All Might in one of his costumes. If you watch the show, he actually did wear this costume at one point in the show. Yeah, there's also this costume which is considered a Silver Age costume, which is basically Kate. This is more familiar costume, like this modern day one. And you mostly see just All Might just punching a bunch of stuff. This little girl basically inspiration, and it's just even quirkless like power. And he says that like her father is basically his hero, because he does behind the scenes stuff. She wants to become like her papa. And we see look like a young Midoriya basically being picked on by Bakudo. And that's it. Cute little chapter. Unlike what was One Piece, where it was basically nothing. This I thought was a really cute little chapter. Now for chapter 193, picking up right where the last chapter left off, with Midori covered with this black stuff. Yeah. Now this I thought was so interesting. He says, okay. Yeah, basically they're showing off most of the predecessors for the previous people who were the possessors of all for one for all. They show off All Might's mentor, this smoking hot woman who's Todori's grandmother, which All Might didn't know until All for One told him that. And he says, there's one missing. And they actually kind of show who this person is in this chapter. Yeah, basically the first one. Yeah, it looks like that it's the younger brother of All for One. That's what it looks like. And you show like this little partial backstory of him. Or apparently he's like bullied by other people. And he's like followed me. And it's Todoroki. Prior to him getting his little hand, his prosthetic hands that he has, like one on his face, it's like covering his arms, but for some reason he doesn't like showing his face off. So a lot of time we see him, he looks like this, which I keep thinking, though, how can this guy breathe if if his hand comes up his face? My personal guess is he probably just covers up some particular way. And this, I thought was Todoroki is somebody else. Yeah, so this power is kind of taken. You see a brief flashback of All Might, and apparently that's kind of what in the chat, and he just wakes up. I think it's and then somebody, I'm not sure who this is, says, "Hey Midoriya, what do you make all those noises in the middle of the night?" And then we see Midoriya's room, and it's like, oh crap, his room is a wreck. Like his sheets have been torn up, a chair has been toppled over. Man, his room is a mess. Like something must have happened for him to do that. And then you see his hands look like, not bruised up, look like there's black stuff on his hands. Yeah, apparently this is all about the first wielder of All for One. I'm like, this is interesting. I think I know who this is. This is the guy, look at him now. Oh yeah, I know who this is. This is the guy who fires a laser from his belly button. Yeah, this weird, bizarre guy. Yeah, as for how in the world that his room got like this, I don't know if Midoriya even notices that his room is a mess. Yeah, his figure's been toppled over and all his bed's been torn up. Some of his posts knocked off of the wall. Apparently he had a fight in here somehow, and it woke up I Always Sparkle. I call him basically Twinkle Toes. Yeah. Really good chapter. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. It's a fantastic chapter. And it looks like it's set up for basically a possible meeting between, with more of developing the One for All quirk. I think that's what this arc is going to do, because the Endeavor stuff is basically done. I think that the writer is done with the Endeavor arc. Didn't last very long. It was only about 4 chapters, 4 or 5 chapters. It wasn't very long, actually. And it seems like this arc is focusing on Midoriya. And maybe it's going to do something that the series has not done yet. Explore the backstory of the predecessors of All for One. I mean, there is going to be the My Hero Academia film is going to explore All Might's backstory. Fine. Maybe with this particular arc, we're actually going to explore the other possessors of the One for All quirk. We're going to explore their backstories. Or I think it's going to be on the first one. We're going to explore more of him, which is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so that's it for this particular review. Stay tuned next week, where I'm going to talk about next week's episode of the anime, which is called Rush. And yes, the next chapter is called Rush. Yes, I have Volume 12 right here, because this is where they're adapting from now. And yes, the next episode, which is actually Rush, is actually chapter 108. Yeah, that's the name of the chapter is 108. It's called Rush. So my personal theory is that next week's episode is going to adapt chapters 107 and 108. Thank you. That's probably my guess what they can adapt next week. But that's probably as far as they can do too. And I will give my thoughts on 193. Now, this one did not say about the whole thing about Shonen Jumping and Break. That probably is for One Piece. Yeah. So, until you see you in the next video, bye.